Alright guys, we're back, cracking open more files on the mutant monsters of Resident Evil 9. These things used to be people, man, but after the virus got to them, they became straight up biological weapons. Terrifying ones. Every single creature has its own insane backstory, a failed experiment, or the result of some absolutely unhinged human ambition gone wrong. So what freaks are we diving into next? How were they even made? Buckle up, grab your snacks, get comfortable. We're jumping deep into the Resident Evil universe. Let's go. So one of the biggest surprises in Resident Evil 9 is the appearance of the Tyrant 501, the T-501. This thing serves as Xeno's personal bodyguard, and it's basically the direct successor to the Tyrant 103 bloodline, which first showed up in Raccoon City back in 1998. You all remember rookie cop Leon Kennedy, right? Getting chased all over the RPD by Mr. X on literally his first day of work. After years of development and refinement, the T-501 is considered one of the most complete bioweapons the Connections organization has ever produced. But to really understand where this Tyrant lineage comes from, we gotta rewind all the way back to when the project first kicked off. The Tyrant project was a top-secret Umbrella initiative that launched in 1988. The goal? Create the ultimate biological weapon, smart enough and strong enough to completely replace frontline soldiers. The very first prototype was the T-001, also known as the Proto-Tyrant. But this one? Total failure. Severe tissue necrosis kicked in. The spine and major organs were literally exposed outside the body. That gave it some critical weak points right off the bat. On top of that, T-001 showed serious neurological instability. Umbrella figured the issue was the initial viral dose being way too high, causing the mutation to spiral completely out of control. After that failure, the Tyrant project basically stalled for years. Researchers discovered that the T-virus could only produce a Tyrant if it was fully compatible with the host. And the compatibility rate? Absolutely abysmal. Only about 1 in 10,000 people could even become a viable host. That made mass-producing Tyrants nearly impossible to scale up. The T-002 was the next major milestone in the project. Compared to the Proto-Tyrant, T-002 had much lower brain damage and maintained more stable intelligence. The body decomposition wasn't nearly as severe either. Umbrella also performed a ton of surgical enhancements, most notably implanting a secondary heart outside the ribcage. This was to boost circulation and support a way more intense metabolic rate. By 1998, Umbrella pushed the Tyrant line even further, using cloned embryos based on T-002 to produce the T-103. To solve the insanely low T-virus compatibility issue, scientists used something called beta-heteronon-serotonin, a hormone extracted from children's brains. When injected into a host, it altered neural structures and helped the T-virus bond way more stably. This dramatically improved the success rate of the mutation process. T-103 is considered the most refined version of the Tyrant project. With its enhanced metabolic rate, its cellular regeneration is absolutely insane. It can heal wounds mid-combat, like instantly recovering from damage. Its strength in this state is comparable to a full-grown rhinoceros. One punch from this thing will shatter your bones. Except for Leon, of course, because he's built different. The T-103 line also has stable intelligence and can be trained to track and ambush specific targets. There's a small device embedded in its temple that lets a command center beam orders directly to the Tyrant, keeping it completely loyal to whatever mission it's given. To help the Tyrant blend into society without raising suspicion, Umbrella designed them to look fairly human. The T-103 clones have no visible claws or obvious deformities, but the most crucial part of the Tyrant design is that iconic trench coat called the power limiter. During research, Umbrella noticed that the T-virus causes the Tyrant to keep mutating whenever it takes heavy damage. Cells don't just heal, they actually transform to adapt to the combat environment. If that process goes unchecked, the Tyrant slowly becomes a deformed blob of flesh with zero controllability. The power limiter coat was specifically designed to suppress that mutation. As long as the coat is intact, the Tyrant maintains a human-like appearance and stays behaviorally stable. But the moment that coat gets destroyed by heavy fire or serious damage, the suppression wears off. And then the Tyrant enters a new transformation phase, known as Super Tyrant. In this state, the Tyrant's body radically transforms to optimize for rapid target elimination. One arm swells into an enormous mass of muscle with razor-sharp claws that can shred through flesh or punch straight through metal. The muscle and bone density cranks up dramatically, making it insanely resistant to damage. The secondary heart is also now exposed on the chest to keep up with the body's extreme metabolic demands. A lot of people wonder, why would Umbrella design such an obvious weak point like that? If they wanted it safer, they could have put that heart somewhere way harder to reach, like on the back or deep inside the body. But Umbrella had a different calculation, with insane tissue regeneration and combat ability far beyond human limits. They believed that even landing a precise shot on the heart wouldn't make that big of a difference on the battlefield. In practice, the Tyrant isn't some sitting duck that enemies can calmly aim at. It's constantly moving, attacking, and applying relentless pressure, which makes exploiting that weak point way harder than it sounds in theory. In Super Tyrant form, the T-501 is way more agile than its base form. It can leap and close the gap on targets at insane speed, while still regenerating wounds on the fly during combat. With that kind of power and speed, even elite special units, trained specifically to deal with bioweapons, like BSAA or Elite Guards, can have their entire formation torn apart in a matter of seconds. Sure, the exposed heart is still a critical weak point, but capitalizing on that window. To actually take down a Tyrant requires some absolutely elite-level combat skill. According to the Connection's price list, each individual T-501 costs up to $120 million US, a cutting-edge, astronomically expensive bioweapon. And yet, our man Leon just deals with it in a few minutes. Looking back, that really is kind of a waste. NGL. The moment Leon steps into the eastern district of Raccoon City, he immediately gets jumped by a colossal creature, lurking in the shadows. That's the Titan Spinner, a mutant spider bioweapon created by the Connections. This thing was released into the defensive perimeter to collect real combat data on their bioweapons and to eliminate any Spec Ops forces, like BSAA, that tried pushing deeper into the ARC facility. The Titan Spinner is basically an evolved version of an old Umbrella project that should have been buried and forgotten a long time ago. To understand where this creature really comes from, we need to go back in time and open the file on a project known as the Web Spinner. Umbrella's very first spider experiments in history were carried out by Dr. James Marcus, co-founder of Umbrella himself. Back in 1978, he used the most primitive T-virus prototype to infect a tarantula, and the first giant spider was born. A massive creature with heavy internal structural changes to adapt to its new body. Most notably, this spider could spit venom from a distance to attack its prey. After Marcus died in 1988, though, this entire research direction went completely dark. Then in 1990, when the Spencer Mansion's lab facility got back online, the bioweapon program picked up again, giving birth to the Web Spinner. Despite its massive size increase, these things could grow as large as a car. They still maintained the ability to crawl on walls and ceilings. The Web Spinner's body contained huge amounts of toxin, and its fangs could deliver an incredibly potent venom, lethal enough to kill in just a few minutes. The abdomen also housed venom sacs, and if you shot those open, they could explode and spray toxin everywhere. Dangerous for anyone caught in the blast. Here's the thing though, the Web Spinner operated entirely on instinct. It couldn't be trained, and it had zero ability to tell friend from foe. So yeah, Umbrella eventually dropped development on this one, because it was just way too unpredictable to use in actual combat. Years later, when the Connections took over the ARC facility and recovered all of Umbrella's old research data, they restarted the project. And out came the Titan Spinner, a full-blown upgrade from the Web Spinner. The chitin armor covering its body is so dense that most conventional firearms can barely put a dent in it. The Titan Spinner can move freely across any terrain, scaling walls, hanging from ceilings, ambushing prey from out of nowhere. To test its combat effectiveness, the Connections released it into the real-world environment of Raccoon City. The Titan Spinner proved absolutely vicious, with an extremely aggressive territorial instinct. Those mandibles are absolutely terrifying. 3 pairs of massive fangs that can inject venom or straight up clamp onto prey. The victim then gets pulled into a mouth lined with razor teeth, basically a living meat grinder. Despite the thick chitin plating, the Titan Spinner does have some weak spots. The abdominal area and the growths on its body aren't fully protected by armor, making them more vulnerable. I think those yellow tumor-like sacs near the silk glands are where the highest concentration of virus is stored. These could be the energy hubs, driving the Titan Spinner's tissue regeneration. Also, the inside of its mouth is another weak point. If you can land a precise shot down its throat when it's attacking, you can deal some serious damage. Looks like this Titan Spinner had been living in this area for quite a while. Webs absolutely everywhere, showing it had built an entire web of traps to catch prey. Even scarier, this thing can reproduce asexually without a male. Left unchecked, the population could explode rapidly, turning all of Raccoon City into one massive spider nest. And when the food runs out, they could spread to neighboring cities too. Yikes. Interestingly, the Titan Spinner doesn't even appear on the Connection's bioweapon price list, which means it's not considered a finished product, ready for market yet. At this point in time, the Titan Spinner is basically just an incomplete prototype, released to gather combat data, and to act as a glorified guard dog for the Connections. At the ARC facility, the Connections produced a brand new Licker variant called the Licker Beta 2, developed using combined research data from both Umbrella and Tricell. The black market price tag on this thing, $14 million per individual. Insane. For me, the Licker has always been one of the most iconic monsters in the entire Resident Evil universe. What's wild is that its original creation came from a biological accident completely outside Umbrella's control. Specifically, at the Nest Laboratory, Umbrella scientists developed a new T-virus variant called the Epsilon strain. This variant was originally studied to improve mutation control within the T-virus, but when they tested it on zombies, the results were completely unexpected. The T-virus triggered a brand new mutation cycle inside the host's body, pushing the transformation to a whole different level. This phenomenon was called the second VACT. When a zombie takes heavy damage and is close to death, or when its body is nearly depleted of energy, the virus inside suddenly reactivates, triggering a more extreme and intense mutation cycle. The host is no longer a zombie. It transforms into something entirely different. This is the same mechanism that created Crimson Heads in the Spencer Mansion. However, not every zombie evolves into a Licker. Only individuals that reach a severely weakened state from starvation trigger this specific mutation path. Because zombies burn through an enormous amount of energy to stay active, when they can't find enough food, their bodies gradually fall into a near-death coma state. And that's exactly when the Epsilon strain triggers its second outbreak. The host goes through a total physical transformation. The skin peels away completely, revealing dense, highly elastic muscle tissue underneath. The skeleton restructures itself, forcing the creature to move on all fours. In exchange, speed and agility are significantly boosted compared to a zombie. Massive claws allow it to grip tightly onto walls and ceilings, stalking prey from above. And with a single swipe, it can give you a smile that stretches all the way to your ears. Literally. Real gorgeous. Real nice. Yikes. The skull fractures. The brain expands and protrudes outward, covering both eye sockets, leaving the Licker completely blind. However, its hearing becomes extraordinarily hypersensitive to compensate. Even the slightest sound is enough to instantly draw this creature's attention. The Licker's tongue can extend several meters in length. When attacking, it can impale straight through a victim's body, drag them close, and tear them apart. After collecting combat data from the Raccoon City outbreak, Umbrella quickly recognized the commercial value of this creature. Instead of waiting for the mutation to occur randomly, they started figuring out how to artificially trigger the second T-virus mutation in a lab setting. By injecting high-concentration virus doses and controlling the transformation, researchers were able to produce Lickers much more consistently. The mass production version was designated the Evolved Licker and became one of the best-selling bioweapons on the black market. wild. Later, the Tricell Corporation developed the liquor beta variant by injecting the progenitor virus into existing liquor specimens. This new strain was mass-produced and sold to armed organizations for use in warfare. However, liquor beta had one very obvious weakness. Its heart was exposed on its chest, making it easy to kill if you landed a direct hit on that spot. After synthesizing all the data from both Umbrella and Tricell, the connections pushed the line even further with new variants. Those pale-skinned zombies in the research facility inside the base, they're actually prepared host subjects, primed for producing higher-grade bioweapons. From those experiments, a new variant emerged. The Liquor Beta 2. This version is the most refined liquor ever produced at ARC. In this iteration, the biggest weakness of all previous generations was addressed. The heart is no longer exposed. It's fully protected inside the ribcage now. That said, the liquor still isn't invincible. There are still some solid ways to put them down. For example, injecting a hemolytic toxin destroys blood cells on a massive scale. Internal pressure skyrockets, and the creature literally explodes from the inside out. Also, acid or fire work especially well against liquors because their protective skin layer completely peeled away during the mutation. When exposed to corrosive chemicals or extreme heat, the exposed muscle tissue and nervous system take direct damage. This can even cause brain damage and kill the liquor instantly. Even though liquors are incredibly dangerous bioweapons, to the point where even elite guard units struggle hard to deal with them. For Leon, it's a different story. He handles entire groups of these things solo, without even breaking much of a sweat. Maybe that's why, when Sherry asked how he was feeling, Leon just casually replied, "I feel like $1,000,000, babe." Honestly, can't even argue with that. Just counting the bioweapons this old man took out alone, the Connections lost over $800 million in assets. While pushing into ARC, Leon once again has to face off against mutant plant life, the same nightmare that terrorized Raccoon City 28 years ago. To understand this creature's origins, we need to look back at the full history of plant-based bioweapons in Resident Evil. It all started with Plant 42, a giant plant infected with the T-virus. Originally, an Umbrella scientist named Dr. Henry Sarton was just being curious, injecting the T-virus into a plant as a test. The results were way beyond anything he expected. Plant 42 grew at an absolutely horrifying rate. Its roots punched through the building structure to reach water sources below. Vines spread throughout the entire facility, exploiting cracks in the floor to attack any staff who walked by, draining their blood as nutrients. Umbrella later developed a new variant called Plant 43 at the Nest Research Facility. When the T-virus disaster broke out there, Plant 43 quickly lost all control and turned feral. After the laboratory massacre, the creature shifted to a much more terrifying survival mechanism. It started planting seed spores into corpses. Those seeds would germinate within the nervous system and completely take over the host body, creating a plant-based zombie known as the Ivy Zombie. Biophile has a detailed breakdown video on Ivy zombies. Go check that out if you haven't. Back in the present timeline, the Connections revived the plant-based bioweapon program. They recreated Plant 43 and released it into Raccoon City's environment as a natural growing ground. Here, it could develop freely, absorbing groundwater beneath the city. Its nutrients were likely deliberately supplied by researchers through animals released into the area, keeping Plant 43's growth going. Even failed test specimens could be dumped in there to serve as food for this mutant plant. Over time, Plant 43 grew to a nearly uncontrollable scale, roots and vines spreading all throughout the area. Observing Plant 43's structure, it's made up of two main parts. The first is the rigid, woody trunk system, anchored deep into rock and soil, spreading underground to absorb water and minerals. The second is the flexible, mobile vine system used for hunting prey. Since there are no more human corpses to plant spores into, the vines evolved in a different direction. They developed massive flowers, with razor-sharp teeth lining the petals, like a set of jaws. The pistil is hypersensitive to movement in the environment. A single vibration nearby, and the vine shoots forward at lightning speed, like a striking snake, lunging at prey and tearing victims apart. In nature, plants don't need to hunt prey. They generate energy through photosynthesis, but the T virus completely broke that biological mechanism. Once the virus penetrated the plant tissue, it stimulated cellular division at an extreme rate, making it grow dozens of times faster than normal. To survive, Plant 43 was forced to switch to a mechanism similar to real-world carnivorous plants. It began hunting for protein, blood, and organic compounds from animals. Those toothed flowers essentially function as digestive organs. When a victim is crushed inside, digestive enzymes are secreted to break down the flesh and absorb the nutrients. Even though it's still technically a prototype, the Connections classifies Plant 43 in the highest tier of their bioweapon catalog. Price tag? $100 million per specimen. During the harvest and transport of part of the specimen back to the ARC facility, an incident occurred. Plant 43 broke loose and took root again, spreading through the service entrance area, forming an entire mutant plant forest just outside the research base. Because of its plant nature, Plant 43 has a massive weakness to fire. Leon exploited this to burn down a chunk of the creature. But completely eradicating Plant 43 is basically impossible, because its roots are buried so deep underground that as long as the root system survives, this plant can always regrow and come back. As Leon was making his way to the Raccoon City Police Department on his motorcycle, an ambush hit out of nowhere. Victor Gideon unleashed a pack of creatures called Garmer to hunt Leon down right in the middle of the streets. These things are enormous, savage, and built to hunt in packs. The Garmer is actually just an upgraded version of an older Umbrella project. To understand where the Garmer came from, we need to go back to when Umbrella first started developing early bioweapons. Project Cerberus launched in the late 1980s, during the period when Umbrella was testing T-virus applications on various animals. The project's goal was pretty simple: create a predatory creature that could pursue targets fast, hit hard, and be mass-produced easily for the battlefield. Umbrella realized that the Doberman Pinscher was almost the perfect host. This is a breed with professional-level training, renowned for high speed, solid endurance, and strong combat instincts. More importantly, Dobermans have an extremely high obedience level, which meant that even after T-virus transformation, Cerberus could still retain partial command-following reflexes. When T-virus beta strain was directly injected into the Doberman, biological changes happened almost instantly. Muscle strength and combat ability skyrocketed, while the pain threshold nearly vanished completely. Speed and endurance increased dramatically, allowing Cerberus to pursue targets for extended periods, while feeling virtually no pain or exhaustion. In exchange, the Cerberus body also suffered severe damage. Skin began to necrotize, exposing raw, red muscle underneath. Many individuals even had their ribs exposed. The Cerberus brain started degenerating similarly to zombies, making them increasingly difficult to control over time. Vision also deteriorated continuously until they were nearly completely blind, but became incredibly sharp, allowing Cerberus to detect prey from even the tiniest vibrations in the environment. Despite Cerberus was still rated by Umbrella as one of their most cost-effective bioweapons. In terms of production cost, the host, no complex surgeries needed, like the Tyrant. After the first prototype succeeded, Umbrella started mass cloning them, fast making Cerberus one of the most widely deployed products in the corporation. The Connections recovered all of the Cerberus project data and developed a new generation called the Garmer. The name comes from Norse mythology. In legend, Garmer is the massive hound that guards Hell, the realm of the dead. It's often considered the Norse equivalent of Cerberus, the three-headed dog guarding the gates of Hades in Greek mythology. The name choice was very deliberate, emphasizing that Garmer is the direct successor to Cerberus. Despite being developed from Cerberus data, the Garmer looks quite different. Its body is bigger, coat longer and thicker, making it look more like a giant wolf than a Doberman. Though some familiar traits are still there, like the exposed ribcage, showing that the T-virus still causes the same skin necrosis as the original. Compared to the original Cerberus, Garmer is noticeably faster, stronger, and more aggressive, designed to track and pursue targets at speeds exceeding 60 miles per hour. Research data shows that the T-virus altered the bone structure and tendon systems of the host. The hind leg bones were elongated, and the tendons stretched longer, acting like a coiled spring, launching it forward with explosive force. Once it has a target locked, escaping from a pack of these things is basically impossible. According to the Connections price sheet, Each Garmer goes for around $30 million. But unfortunately for the connections, Leon wiped out around 13 Garmer in just a few minutes, equivalent to nearly $390 million in bioweapons, just evaporating. So we've now gone through the file on pretty much every creature that appears in Resident Evil 9. But the story doesn't stop here. There are still two extremely important villains behind all of these horrifying experiments, and they deserve their own dedicated video for a proper deep dive. So in the next part, we're going even deeper into their origins throughout the events of Resident Evil 9. If you're enjoying these monster breakdown videos from Biofile, don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button to show your support. See you in the next one.